Hammers are strong. Hammers are resilient. Hammers build up. Hammers tear down. Hammers fix. Hammers restore. Hammers protect. Hammers provide. Hammers do hard things. Hammers are put to work. Our mission is to equip men with the tools to serve themselves so they can best serve others. We seek to create a community of men who are lions, lambs, and servant leaders. We strive to forge men into hammers who contend for faith and truth in all things and are empowered to build up and bless other people always. Are you on mission? Are you an asset or a liability? Are you making an impact where you live, work, and play? Be a hammer, not a nail. Welcome to the Hammer Forged Life podcast with our founder and host, Jake Dicus.
I just want to make a statement that I do have the most profound stripes in my front yard of anybody in my neighborhood.
Are you out there in the snow mowing it, doing it that way?
I actually did, like the day before Christmas. I actually went, there was like leaves and everything. I just wanted to make sure that the stripes were fresh, even though the grass is brown, totally dormant. The leaves were vacuumed up and the stripes were illuminated, so to speak.
Did you stop and celebrate that win, Steve?
I did. I told my wife, I said, hey, you should take a look at that lawn out there, you know?
You know, it's interesting that we bring that up because in the beginning we talked about celebrate the wins no matter how big or small that they are. Michael just alluded to that as well. And I think Evan from Black Rifle Coffee, I listened to a podcast of his and he talked about this similar topic, but he's huge on that. And I believe he has a list of 20 to 30 small things that are non-negotiables that he does every single day to ensure that he is winning from the time that he gets up to the time he goes back to sleep. And it just compounds on one another. And it's as simple as when I get up, I make my bed. I don't hit snooze. I spend time in prayer, you know, and it looks different for every man, but there's no denying the fact that celebrating those wins, no matter how big or how small, is very, very important. I think we have this natural inclination to look at these big, grandiose things, you know, like I paid off this $10,000 credit card. Boom, I finally got a win, forsaking all the other things that you did beforehand with saving $25 a week and putting it into savings or paying off a smaller debt. Cutting back on different expenses so you can create some cushion in your finances. Like all of those were wins. It wasn't the fact that you just paid off a $10,000 credit card. It was all the other things that snowballed to make that happen. And so when you think in terms of practical ways to celebrate those wins, we hear it all the time. Like, what does that look like? How does one celebrate a win? And so keeping that in mind, like, share with the guys some examples of how they can practically celebrate those wins on a day-to-day basis.
Thanks for that. I think I go back to what I said before. You have to be open and okay with the small things that make you successful every day. And it doesn't have to be a grandiose accomplishment that took you a year to get to, right? It's the little things that boil back into your daily routine and habits that you stack every day to be successful throughout the day. An example of that could be, Jake, you mentioned this, is, don't hit your snooze, drink, a gallon of water a day, do 50 push-ups in the morning, do a stretching routine, go to the gym 3 times a week. Those are wins that you can stack and help build those routines to make you more successful. Another example of a win could be, date night with your spouse, right? Making time for them, devoting time to that, limit yourself on your phone every day instead of just wasting time there. Read a book, listen to an ebook, audiobook, whatever, but learn a new skill. Those are wins as well. So those are some examples that I apply
in my life. I try to read a book a couple times a month and get through them in 2 or 3 months. So I go with a couple at a time. So they're different topics. So that keeps it fresh for me, but that's just an approach I use.
Jake, you ask practical ways to celebrate. For me, I'm going to go back to it again, and I've said it, I think every step here is the self-awareness. So for me, being self-aware of the fact that I didn't raise my voice when my wife shared something for the 16th time in 3 days, and I remained patient and present in the conversation and compassionate in what it is that she wanted to achieve in the conversation. For me, that's a win, because, as men, we want to fix the problem, move on. What's the next challenge? So another way that we can practically celebrate them is to journal. And you've mentioned it before, Jake. Some guys journal once a month, once a week, or maybe only in the morning. Right now, starting this year, I am setting out to journal in the morning and in the evening, so I can take my wins and opportunities at a micro level and then celebrate the little things each and every day where I kept my cool. I didn't get upset about something, and I stayed focused on what it is I told myself in the morning that I would go achieve that day. So when we have that mindset, and that discipline has no choice but to stay on task, so that emotion has less role in what it is you're doing. Now, that takes motivation almost completely out of the picture, because motivation doesn't matter when you've made a decision to accomplish something.
I love how you said that discipline has no choice but to stay on task. To get uber practical, I like doing 2 things. And the first thing is to have a system. And that system looks different for every man. Some guys, like you said, Steve, like you've made a personal commitment to journal every single day. I am not that type of guy I don't like to journal. I don't like to get out that paper and that pen and write stuff down. And I'm not saying that's wrong or right. Maybe I should, because I know that does impact your cognitive abilities with being able to absorb information. But look, let's just call it for what it is. I'm a millennial and I like technology. And so one of the things that I deployed into my life several months ago is I got onto the Apple Reminder app, and you can actually segregate your reminders and tasks into different categories. And so typically I have 4 categories by which I manage my day-to-day tasks. And that is my career goals, my community goals with the Hammer Forge Life, my personal goals. By that, I mean, my relationship with my wife, finances, things to do around the house, all that type of stuff. And the last category is things specifically that feed me. I try my best to be that standard for the men in our community. So if I'm asking guys to work out 3 times a week, I'm going to work out 3 times a week. Oh, by the way, probably 6 or 7. I'm going to do those cold plunges. I'm going to have my prayer time with the Lord. So I segregate all that out into that reminder app. And there are days, and I know we all feel like this sometimes, there are days where you just feel like, what did I do? What have I done today? Have I been productive? Have I been productive this week? And there have been times that I've felt that way. And I open up that app and I look at all the boxes that I checked throughout the week. And I'm like, wow, I did a lot more than I thought that I did. I should stop for a second and celebrate this. Because while I was feeling like I did absolutely nothing and was feeling like garbage, like the low of the low, oh, wretched man that I am, I go back and look at that data. And I checked off 20, 30, 40, 50 boxes the week prior. It's like, yeah, you know what? I have a reason to feel confident and I have a reason to celebrate. So that is something that's worked for me. And the second thing I'll say is an after action review. Take time at the end of every single week, whether that is a Saturday for you, a Sunday evening, Monday morning, but have this time where you look and assess your week prior and notate every single thing that you did well, every single little win, from taking out the garbage to making your bed to drinking 8 glasses of water a day, working out 3 times a week, taking your spouse on a date, playing Legos with your kids. It doesn't matter. Audit and assess your week prior and just know that you're doing a lot better than you think that you're doing. Men inherently put all this pressure. We put all this pressure on ourselves. And I think we live more in a state of brokenness and shame and feeling like we're not living up to our potential than we actually are. At the end of the day, we're doing a lot better than we think that we are. We just have to take the time and create that sacred space to reflect on that. And that's what's worked really well for me. And go ahead, Michael.
I was just going to jump in real quick. I would say teach your kids to play chess, not Legos. Better game. Second thing would be, from a professional perspective, a lot of people have a checklist at work every day. You have a routine that you have to do if you're a manager or a leader, which will be a podcast you need to go look at soon from us as well. But the idea is that you've got a list and a system in place that you're in your professional life. In most cases, flip the script and apply it in your personal life and see what happens.
Amen.
Both of you had said the word system, and I forget the exact statement, but there's a statement that says, you will never rise to the level of your goals. You will always fall to the level of your system. And that is so applicable in our every single day life. You can't say, I want $30,000 in my savings account by December 31st without having a system of meal prepping, not eating out, not doing unnecessary driving. Like, you have to have the system in place.
Why doesn't it happen, Steve? Come on. Why doesn't it happen? I want $30,000 in my bank account by December 31st. You guys write in, help us out.
Yeah. Yeah. The system matters for sure. And I'll tell you this, having gone through a lot of the curriculum a little over a year ago, the Path 8-Week Challenge absolutely helps each man dial in his system. And I think it's invaluable to each and every dude that has actually completed our challenge. And I'll be very bold to say, there's a lot of guys that started our challenge and they drop out because they're not committed. Their pain of staying the same hasn't reached a threshold where the pain of change is welcomed. And so, of those guys that drop out, we do have a high return rate and say, you know what, it's a pretty good thing, and I need to get on there and finish that. We actually were talking about that earlier this morning. So our curriculum and our system helps each man dial in and understand what it is that they're called to do and how to get that plan and system in place.
Yeah, I mean, so to give one last piece of advice before we switch gears, Steve, that quote is from Atomic Habits. And if I could suggest any book for any man to read, no matter where you're at in life, read that book. It is gold, and it's so true. Steve mentioned that, we have a rate of men, and I believe the statistic is about 25%. 25% of men who come through our program fail. And the difference between the 25 and the 75% is they did not want to create a system. They wanted to just go off of motivation or this emotion or this feeling that they had. And that only takes you so far. Guys would come in 3 weeks and then fail and then leave the group, or they make it to week 5 and then they've exhausted that sense of motivation and emotion and they ghost us and they just drop out and don't return our phone calls or return our text messages and all that type of stuff. So having a system that creates positive habits that reinforce the behaviors that you want to drive you forward and move the needle forward in your life could not be more important. But definitely pick up Atomic Habits by James Clear and make that one of your goals to read this year in 2025, 100%. And so we've talked exhaustively about wins. Now let's talk about the other side of the coin. Because at the end of the day, one thing is for certain, and it's that we're all going to make a mistake. We're going to fall short. And looking at it through a biblical lens, since the fall of man in Genesis 3, we have succumbed to a broken world with a natural propensity towards sin. And let us recall what sin actually means. When you break that down, it actually means to miss the mark. Just like an archer aiming towards his target and missing, so we often miss that mark in many areas of our lives. And instead of hiding in shame like Adam and Eve did in Genesis 3, we should seek reconciliation through repentance and getting our sight picture and alignment back on target to take a better shot. Why should shortcomings, failures, and sin, why should they be viewed as an opportunity to improve opposed to being a shortcoming or failure?
I'll say this, 100%, the key word in that question that you asked, Jake, is viewed. So our perspective will absolutely determine our life experience. So if we are viewing life in a negative connotation, we are going to see them as failures. If we are viewing life, we are going, in a positive way, with our, first of all, with our vision in mind. If you don't have the vision, your motivation ain't going to get you very far at all. But the vision will drive you through whatever you face. And so therefore, every time you see an opportunity rather than a failure, you can identify ways that next time you see this circumstance or situation, you are going to respond in a different manner that will move you forward towards the goal that you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, to me, we talked about after action reviews, and those are opportunities. One of the questions you look at there is what went well, what didn't, what can I do to improve that? To me, if you're doing that and you have that in your system and you have a vision of who you want to be and you missed the mark, right? You made it, you failed at something. To me, it's what am I going to do to help enhance that, to make that better? How can I achieve that piece which I missed? How can I forgive myself if it's egregious and move forward with that? Don't dwell in the negativity of that. Wins and opportunities are all about that. When you're stacking all these wins, the next win is an opportunity for success, right? Even if you miss it, hey, I want to run a 5K in 20 minutes, whatever the number is. Obviously, I don't run 5Ks. I think that's pretty fast.
That's really fast.
Okay. Yeah. See, there you go. My point is, though, that if you're at 21, what do I do to shave off a minute? And to me, it's what do I do to get that next win, which builds on successes. And then that's a positive mindset, because now it's an opportunity. It's not a failure.
And let's not get it twisted. What we're not implying is that when you make a mistake, you get this participation trophy and and a pat on the back saying, oh, it's okay, you can do better next time. That's not what we're saying. Don't get it twisted. What we're saying is, just like we are taking the time to assess and audit the things that we've done well with our wins, we should be doing the same with the things that we've done that aren't working, that are failures to some degree, or an adversity that we let control us instead of us pushing through. We're just assessing them in the same likeness as we would our wins, and accepting and taking ownership of them, okay, with an understanding that we do have to get better. It provides us that feedback of, okay, so when I had this type of tone with my spouse, she got upset and it caused an argument. So maybe I, instead of having that tone, should filter my words and come at that conversation in a posture that is going to be a conduit through which good conversation and feedback should flow. All it is auditing and doing better at the end of the day. Again, going back to what I said earlier, we're problem solvers. And so when we miss the mark in some area of our life, that is a problem to solve at the end of the day. And so instead of just allowing it to create a sense of shame, guilt, and condemnation, just like the fall of man in Genesis 3, we should look at it as a way for us to get better at the end of the day and to have that feedback of doing it differently the next time around. And so there's so many different scenarios through which we could apply this type of mindset. And we talked a lot about mental and emotional health when it comes to the impact of wins, but let's talk specifically about physical health. How important is the mindset of opportunities to improve when it comes to your physical state and overall sense of fitness and well-being?
I mean, Steve said it well in the quote from Atomic Habits. I go right to that one, right? The pain of staying in the same place is greater than moving forward, or what I always get
You
that
are no longer allowed to quote anything,
So what was the quote, Steve?
because that is a Tony Robbins quote.
Yeah, that's Tony Robbins, and my quote was having a system. So I love it.
Anywho,
I think you need another
so
rock
yeah, I'm sure
star.
that'll hit the
Just
cutting
keep, just
board.
let's not quote anybody. Just keep that train of thought and just keep it flowing.
I'm with you. So, to me, the physical aspect of opportunity comes in. I'll use a personal story. When I had a knee replacement a couple years ago, up until that point, physical stuff was taxing at best in a lot of instances. And so once I did that, the opportunity was, now I need to rehab and get better so I can get back at it, get to a level I was at, and then get beyond that. And so for me, the opportunity was every day I did more than what I was supposed to. I wanted to get better faster. I need to do more of this exercise. I need to walk more. I need to do more stretches, whatever that was, so I can get back into the gym, right? I was back in my gym in 10 months. Now, doing squats, doing, CrossFit type workouts now, not as intense, but to me, the physical aspect of opportunity becomes with capacity. If I can do 10 push-ups a day, can I do 15 tomorrow, right? You're building on the capacity, building on that win to get better, better, and better. Yeah, I got jacked up, so yeah.
No, it's not hard for you to do.
So, especially at your age, sir.
Wow.
Just kidding.
What is the importance of opportunities to improve when it comes specifically to your physical state?
The importance is remaining consistent and stacking consistent day upon consistent day. For me specifically, it builds mental resilience and discipline without effort. The side effect is physical improvement. So, for example, I really love riding mountain bikes. I am the kind of guy, like many others, I'm going to go out and get a PR on Strava or whatever every time I go out. But I realize that if I did a ride for 3 months, I'm going to be very depressed on my results climbing, Cheyenne Mountain or whatever it is. So, the importance of it physically is understanding that your body is composed of, at a molecular level, blood and oxygen and muscle cells and everything, and remaining consistent and building the resistance training to continue to grow is absolutely required. If you want to be an asset rather than a liability, it's critical to stack the little wins of showing up every morning when you said you would, instead of, breaking promises to yourself. So on the mental and emotional side, when you don't show up, it has the adverse effect. Now you're emotionally drained because you broke another promise to yourself. You are atrophying minute by minute because you're not remaining with the plan and schedule to build your body stronger every day. So, we had in one of our chat groups online, Jake, this week, we had a conversation where someone said, well, why is neutral going backwards? And it was a different application, but neutral is going backwards because the world is spinning at whatever million miles an hour through outer space at God's control. And no matter what you do, everything around you is moving. You need to be moving forward. If you are not moving forward, you are falling backwards. So the relevance and importance is to stay on track no matter how you feel and continue to be stronger every day.
Isn't the physical state just a breeding ground when it comes to viewing that as an opportunity to improve? You think about it, right? Like when you go into the gym or you do whatever form of exercise or programming that you like, there's always another PR. There's always another 5 pounds that you can add. There's always another minute that you can shave off. It's nothing but a atmosphere of improvement. It's going in to try to hit a PR on your deadlift and you up it 10 pounds, realizing that you didn't do it. And then there's that feedback that happens of, okay, well, I need to improve on maybe doing deficit deadlifts, or maybe I need to strengthen my glutes or my hamstrings, or whatever you need to do within that posterior chain to be able to hit that PR in the future. So the physical state in and of itself could not be a better example of being in a constant state of improvement. Going in, having a crappy workout, knowing you can do better the next day. And I know this wasn't part of the question, but if we would adopt that same mindset that we could in the gym with every other area in our life, always looking for a way to become better, that 1% better mentality, taking 2 steps backwards and then moving 3 steps forward. That's what unleashes the greatness that has been embedded deep within you forever, since the dawn of time. Again, you go back to the fall, everything was created good. And when God created man, he said, this is very good. And instantaneously, he gave man authority and rulership and dominion. And guess what happened? We screwed it up. We fell, and then brokenness entered that world. But Jesus came in the form of the ultimate sacrifice to reconcile those deficiencies for us to regain that sight picture and sight alignment to get back on target. And so staying in that mindset could not be more important. But what are the pitfalls of not having that mindset, of not viewing shortcomings and failures as opportunities, of not getting back on target? What are the pitfalls and the gaps and pinch points of adopting that type of perspective?
I think that if you don't begin to analyze and first of all, identify the shortcomings in the first place, then analyze what it is. It's kind of in a sense like spinning your wheels in the mud, right? Not going anywhere. You got all the horsepower and torque, but you're with no traction. So if you're idly spinning and not moving forward, it's because you didn't see the things around you to gain traction, whether you need a board under the tire or change tire pressure or whatever it is, or you took the wrong entry point, reassessing, backing up, and going, just like you said, Jake, 2 steps forward, 2 steps backward, and 3 steps forward. We need to do that in life. And like I said earlier, it starts with our vision and our perspective. If we don't have the right perspective, first of all, you're never going to see those shortcomings in the first place. You're just going to be like, well, this isn't going to happen in my life, or you're going to have a negative mindset of not being able to achieve the thing. So you have to be able to spot and identify the areas of opportunity in the first place, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing the same thing, repeatedly expecting different results is insanity, right? And
he nailed it, guys. He nailed it. Wow.
Okay, who was the one that originally quoted it, Michael?
I go Einstein.
I think it was Einstein, actually.
Yeah, I know that one. So,
let us know in the comments.
Yeah. I would tell you that the only way to have a different result is to have a review of the result and assess where you need to go from that. You have to have the same approach to your wins as you do your opportunities. I mean, I was going to say that earlier when Jake was on a run, but I agree. I mean, it makes so much sense that, yeah, hey, this is great. I did good. I'll just forget about the bad stuff and hope it gets better, right? That's not how it works. we have to embrace those failures and the things that aren't working to build on those successes just as much. It's equally important.
That's actually, there's a lot of brilliance in what you just said, Michael. And I think a lot of people may have just kind of brazed right over what you said. And essentially, if we ignore the shortcomings and we only feed into the win alone, we are then by default living on that short-term or quick reward, the dopamine hit, the whatever it is, and not enduring the actual change, solidifying the foundation by which we're working from. If we don't face the opportunities, it will be short-lived every single time. You might make it all the way to August this year with your goals. Like, last year you made it to March or the middle of February. Maybe this year you make it to August. But if you don't address the shortcomings and opportunities, it will not be sustainable. Bottom line.
Well
So
said.
I want to read a lengthy passage of scripture that I think embodies this idea of wins and opportunities better than anything else. And so for our listeners, we're going to be reading out of 1 Samuel chapter 17. And I will be skipping, so for the sake of time, I will be skipping some verses and working our way through the story of David and Goliath. So 1 Samuel 17, it says, "On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. David said to Saul, 'Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him.'" In verse 33, we pick up, it says, "Saul replied, 'You are not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You are only a young man, and he has been a warrior from his youth.' But David said to Saul, 'Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep. When a lion or a bear came out and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it, struck it, and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because he has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine.' Saul said to David, 'Go, and the Lord be with you.'" In verse 41, it says, "Meanwhile, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer to David. He looked David over and saw that he was a little more than a boy, glowing with health and handsome, and he despised him. He said to David, 'Am I a dog that you come at me with these sticks?' And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. 'Come here,' he said, 'and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals.' David said to the Philistine," I love this, "'You come against me with the sword and spear and javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands. I will strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there is a God in Israel. All those gathered here will know that it is not by sword or spear that the Lord saves, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give all of you into our hands." Verse 48, as the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran quickly towards the battle line to meet him. Reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck the Philistine on the forehead. The stone sank into his forehead, and he fell face down on the ground. So David triumphed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, without a sword in his hand, and he struck down the Philistine and killed him. David ran and stood over him. He took hold of the Philistine's sword and drew it from his sheath. After he killed him, he cut off his head with the sword. When the Philistines saw that their hero was dead, they turned and ran. Then the men of Israel and Judah surged forward with a shout and pursued the Philistines to the entrance of Gath and to the gates of Ekron. Their dead were strewn across the Sharim road to Gath and Ekron. When the Israelites returned from chasing the Philistines, they plundered their camp. David took the Philistine's head and brought it to Jerusalem. He put the Philistine's weapons in his own tent. As Saul watched David going out to meet the Philistine, he said to Abner, commander of the army, "Abner, who is that young man?" Abner replied, "As surely as you live, your majesty, I don't know." The king said, "Find out whose son this young man is." As soon as David returned from killing the Philistine, Abner took him and brought him before Saul, with David still holding the Philistine's head, mind you. "Whose son are you, young man?" Saul asked him. David said, "I am the son of your servant Jesse of Bethlehem." After reading this amazing story in these scriptures, what can we all conclude from this story and others in the Bible regarding wins, opportunities, and leveraging them to become strong men overall?
Man, there's so much there.
So much.
I mean, it takes faith to a whole new level and makes you really analyze what does the term faith actually mean and how is it interpreted by those who actually say it. If we have faith that God's going to provide a meal, that's one thing. If we have faith with confidence that he's already gone before us and he is in control and has the victory of those that believe wholeheartedly in him for their future, it changes our approach and mindset in all things. If you look at this, the confidence level of David is through the roof. And we go back to the earlier statement that confidence is much different than arrogance, because David goes in, he's not saying anything. And there's more to the story that we skip through, obviously, for time, where Saul says, if you're going to go face this dude, you're going to have to put on my armor. I have the greatest armor. And David puts it all on, and it's way too heavy, too big. It's down. He's sluggish. He can't move. He's like, nope, I ain't doing this. I'm doing what I do in the way that God has created me to the best of my ability to perform what it is God's called me to do. Essentially, that's the message. And so even when you fast forward to the finish line of what it is, that passage that you read, when Saul says, "Who are you?" he doesn't say, "I'm the dude that just killed the Philistine." He says, "I am the son of your servant Jesse," period. He is still the same humble follower of God.
Come on.
Plain and simple. He executed the biggest dude on the planet in that given time and released his entire nation of people from the oppression of this burden. And now, according to Goliath's own statement, they are now going to, the Philistines are now going to serve them. So it wasn't that David did it. It's that God did it. And David, he executed the plan that God put in his heart. So that's what we have to do on the day-to-day. And this is so profound, and I'm not going to, attempt to compare a meeting I have with a client next week or whatever to me facing Goliath. That isn't even close. But I can compare a mindset and a faith that will absolutely impact your entire life if you understand who God is and who God sees you as precious and perfect through his son's life and death and resurrection. You then can face life in a totally different perspective. You understand there's no limit to what God wants to do in your life or through your life to impact other people in a positive way. And ultimately, I mean, that's our mission statement, right? We equip men with the tools to serve themselves so they can best serve others. Starts with, can you hear God's voice? Do you understand who God is? Do you recognize him as the authority figure, as creator and Lord of all? And do you put him on the side burner when he needs to be reigning in the throne, and you recognize that and come to his throne through grace and pray for wisdom and discernment in the direction that he's called you to go? Then that's when you analyze the plan you have. Is it congruent with that? Pray about it, move forward, and step by step, you execute each plan, stack the wins, and here you are. You can answer Saul and say, I am servant of the Most High.
Come on, it's good stuff.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I would, you went right to the first word that I'd come to, which is undeniable faith. And I will go back into some of what we talked about earlier about wins. I mean, there was no the option of failure wasn't even in his mindset. It was, I'm going to win. There's no denying it, so to me, that mindset applies. If you walk into situations with that mindset and you need support, pray on it. That's fine as well. Gather your thoughts, get your motivation there. But the idea is have the mindset of positivity that you're not going to fail. No matter what happens, I'm always going to be successful. And that's what I take from that in a short spot, right? I mean, there's a lot more to that to unpack for sure. But just, hearing that, reading it earlier, that's where I went, undeniable faith. And, we talk about being lions, lambs, and leaders. Well, he was a lion and a leader for sure. And then he was a lamb when he brought the rest of his fold in to move forward and, have the Philistines, serve the Israelites. Right. So, it's a great, example of, us as a community, lions, lambs, and leaders.
Yeah, I mean, like you guys have mentioned, there's so much there. There's a reason why churches across the country preach so many sermons on just this one chapter alone, because there's so much you can take away from it. Practically speaking, as it pertains to the topic of conversation, we see without question that David stacked his wins. Again, going back to something I said earlier, we see where Saul was in a way diminishing his ability because of his stature. And David was quick to remind Saul, look, this is what I've done in my life as a shepherd boy. I've rescued my flock. I've pulled these wild beasts by the hair. I've saved them from the paw of the lion and the bear. What is this Philistine? And it was that confidence based on the history of his successes that propelled him in confidence to fight, as Steve put it, the biggest man on the planet. But on the flip side, we also see where King Saul had an opportunity to improve by having more faith, obedience, and trust in the Lord to deliver his army from the hand of the Philistines. So this chapter is just riddled with wins and opportunities to improve. And I think we can learn from that and apply it to our lives and ensure that we're constantly looking through it from that perspective and lens to grow as a man, as a lion, lamb, and servant leader. And so to land this plane and to conclude this episode, would you guys just give a final statement of just what you feel, why you feel that this is important for every man, and maybe a call to action as well?
So it's got to start with self-reflection. Analyze the way that you have faced adversity in your past. Understand by what resources did you get through that or turn and run from it, and how is it going to be different moving forward? One of the other things that we have in our creed is that we are men who stand up for faith and truth in all things. We're contenders. We speak for those who can't speak for themselves, and we fight for truth. So if you look back at this passage again, you see that David clearly says his why for doing this massive thing that was so big it has made it into the scripture for us to recognize for all time, for all people to review and assess this specific thing that took place. He said, "This Philistine has defied the armies of the true and living God." He stood up for truth, for what he knew was truth, and understood the role that God played in the life of the Israelites in general. And he said, well, why, faith like a child. He said, well, why in the world are we even backing down? Do we not know what God has done for us in the past? So not only was he stacking wins and sharing the reason that he was capable to Saul about the lion and the bear, but he also knows the history of what God has done for his people since Abraham. He understands and he believes wholeheartedly what God is capable of. So You need to assess your life, understand where you are, how you faced adversity in the past, and ask yourself, where is God in your life and what has he done for you in the past? And once you realize that the only thing that God is limited to is what you don't allow him to do in your life by not following through, by putting limitations on it. If you wholeheartedly go after God, he will deliver in his time what it is that he has planned for you. The only limitation is when you say no and when you turn away and you run. And I will second with this. Fear is not from the Lord. We do not have a spirit of fear, but a spirit of power and of love and a sound mind.
Amen.
Period. So when you recognize fear in your life, recognize that is not from God. Remove that thought and focus back on God and understand that he desires to deliver you into abundance in your life. Not abundance just financially or materialistically, but really abundantly in relationship with him, experiencing love and peace and joy and strength and courage in whatever situation you face, just as David in this scenario.
Yeah, I mean, very well said. If we look at how men can, incorporate wins and opportunities into their daily routine, I think, we've talked about it a few times today, and Steve hit on it again, is, are you self-aware? Have you reflected on where you're at today? I really think that's the cornerstone to even start. And it's not easy, but that to me is the first step. After that, we talked about systems, and I think that's important. And there's not a cookie cutter system. It's different for everyone, but there's some basic principles of that system: habits, routines, self-reflection, after action reviews, daily, weekly, so you can prepare for the next period of time, whether that's tomorrow or next week. What went well, what didn't. Do honest assessments of where you're at in your journey. And even that journey is going to have a picture of a vision and goals for you in a point in the future. Your vision for next year could be one thing. In 2 years, it's another thing. So it's an evolving vision, but directionally, you want to have a trajectory that your actions and your habits and routines keep you congruent with those visions of where you're going.
The Bible says that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. What is a testimony compiled of? It's compiled of all the things that you've overcome in your life through the power of God working in and through you. And so if we're to have a strong testimony to be a man who is known to overcome challenges, adversities, and everything that life brings our way, we have to stop daily and be self-aware and reflect and seek the Lord and notate every time that God has fought on our behalf, just like David. It wasn't David's ability, skill, confidence, or anything else for that matter that enabled him to be able to defeat Goliath. It was God working in and through him, not just in that moment, but throughout the entirety of his life when it came to the lion, the bear, defending his flock from the wolves. He allowed God to work in and through him. He stacked those wins, and it became a small part of a much bigger testimony that he had towards the end of his life. And so I would call every man to first seek God and allow God to work in you and through you. Practically speaking, I just want to challenge every man to think of 5 to 10 things that they can do every single day starting tomorrow. Make a checklist. Make your bed. Don't hit snooze. Pray before you go to work. Try to get in an early morning workout if you're able. Date your wife, woo her, pursue her like you did when you first started chasing her. Take time to play with your kids. Take time to educate and read a book every single night. look, it looks different for every man, but the fact of the matter is you need to have something that you're aiming towards that can stack wins that will compound over time and give you the confidence to walk your life out with victory. So, appreciate you all. Let's get after it this week. Godspeed.
Let's do it.